The restaurant had always been a quiet place, the kind of spot where people could come to escape the rush of the city for a little while. Its small tables were spaced just enough for privacy. The walls painted a soft cream color, and the air carried a faint aroma of fresh bread and brewed coffee. Every morning, Lena would arrive before sunrise, tying her apron carefully and making sure everything was perfect before the first customers walked in. She had worked here for almost 2 years, and though her job didn't pay much, she liked the warmth of the place and the feeling that she was part of something steady and real. Lena wasn't a flashy person. She didn't wear bold jewelry or expensive clothes. She had simple hair that she tied back neatly and a soft voice that carried kindness without demanding attention. People often noticed her calm nature, and many regulars came back not just for the food but because of the way she smiled and remembered their favorite orders. There was something honest about Lena that drew people in, even if they didn't quite know why. One bright afternoon, the restaurant was humming with activity. The lunch crowd had started to thin, and the smell of fresh pastries mingled with the faint scent of coffee. Lena moved gracefully from table to table, carrying plates and drinks, asking politely if anyone needed anything else. Her movements were practiced, efficient, and almost invisible. She liked it that way. She liked being helpful without needing praise. Today, though, she could feel a strange tension in the air as a group of customers entered the restaurant. They were loud, their footsteps heavy, and the chatter carried an edge that made the other diners glance up with subtle unease. The leader of the group was a woman in a bright dress that shone under the restaurant lights, and her shoes clicked loudly on the tile floor. Her expression was sharp, almost daring, and her eyes scanned the room as if she were evaluating everything and everyone. Lena had learned over the years to recognize that look. She had seen it many times. People who thought the world owed them attention, people who expected service without gratitude. This woman's aura made the staff instinctively tighten. The other 2 women with her seemed to follow her lead, smiling occasionally, but it was clear they were only trying to mirror the energy she was giving off. Lena approached their table politely, a smile on her face. "Good afternoon, welcome. Can I get you started with something to drink?" she asked. Her voice was soft but steady, the kind of tone that tried to calm a tense moment before it even began. The woman in the bright dress didn't smile. She looked at Lena as if seeing her for the first time, even though she had already given her order to the hostess at the door. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the corners of her mouth turning down. "I said sparkling water. Make sure it's cold," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the mild background noise of the restaurant. "And make it quick." There was a flicker of amusement in her eyes, almost like she was testing Lena. Lena nodded politely, took the notepad in her hand, and turned away, careful not to let the sharpness of the moment affect her. She had learned long ago that some people thrived on seeing others flustered, and losing her temper would only give them satisfaction. As Lena filled the glasses, she tried to focus on her rhythm, the small movements she had practiced so many times before. But she could feel the eyes on her back. The woman in the bright dress had not stopped staring, and Lena could sense the tension in her posture. Something in the air was shifting, a subtle but undeniable sense of confrontation. It was as if the woman had decided that her presence alone could dominate the room, and Lena's polite composure was not enough to satisfy her. When Lena returned to the table with the glasses, the woman reached out suddenly and tapped one of them sharply with her manicured fingers. "This isn't cold enough," she said, not even bothering to hide her irritation. Her friends giggled quietly, as if this was all a game. Lena's heart sank slightly, not from the insult itself, but from the realization that this would not be an easy interaction. She bent slightly and asked softly, "Would you like me to bring some ice as well?" Hoping to diffuse the tension. The woman waved her hand dismissively, and Lena left, her movements careful to avoid spilling anything, though inside, a quiet anxiety began to grow. The rest of the afternoon moved slowly. Lena went from table to table, her hands occasionally trembling ever so slightly as she tried to maintain her calm. Every time she passed the group of women, she could feel the weight of their stares. The woman in the bright dress was particularly relentless, her eyes following Lena like she were a subject in some kind of test. It was exhausting, but Lena reminded herself that she had survived worse. She had grown up understanding that patience and composure often mattered more than quick retaliation. Her mother had always said, "Kindness is stronger than pride, but it requires courage." Today, Lena could feel that courage being tested. Finally, the moment came. Lena approached the table with a tray holding the drinks, careful not to spill a single drop. The woman in the bright dress reached out abruptly and grabbed one of the glasses, examining it as though it were a fragile treasure. Without warning, she lifted the glass and tipped it over, letting the fizzy liquid splash across Lena's apron and lap. A gasp echoed from nearby diners. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lena froze for a moment, the cold liquid soaking her uniform, her hands trembling as she realized what had happened. She had been humiliated in front of everyone, and yet she didn't move angrily or shout. She simply stood there, trying to process the sudden betrayal. The woman laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that made the corners of Lena's vision blur. Her friends joined in with quiet giggles, their amusement directed entirely at Lena's discomfort. She felt her throat tighten, but she forced herself to swallow the sting of humiliation. Her eyes met those of a regular customer at a nearby table, and he gave her a small, encouraging nod. That tiny gesture was enough to remind her that she wasn't completely alone, that there were people who recognized her dignity even when others tried to tear it down. Lena carefully bent down to mop the spill with a napkin, ignoring the laughter that rang in her ears. She had learned long ago that controlling the moment and not reacting with anger often spoke louder than any words. Her manager, a kind woman who had been at the restaurant for over a decade, appeared silently beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lena could feel the warmth of the support, the quiet solidarity that said, without words, "I see you, and I have your back." The rest of the group of women left shortly after, throwing a few parting glances over their shoulders that were meant to intimidate but only revealed their own insecurity. Lena cleaned up the last drops of fizzy water, taking slow, deep breaths to steady herself. She reminded herself that this wasn't the end of the story, that her patience and integrity had not gone unnoticed, even if it felt lonely in that moment. By the time the afternoon sun started to fade, casting long shadows across the restaurant floor, Lena was still standing behind the counter, organizing the remaining orders. She knew that life had a way of balancing moments like these. Some people would try to tear others down, but there were always those who saw the truth, who recognized the quiet strength that didn't need to shout or retaliate. She couldn't see it yet, but she sensed that today, something significant was about to change, that the universe had a way of delivering justice in unexpected forms. The restaurant returned to its usual rhythm. The laughter of a few families at nearby tables, the hum of the espresso machine, and the soft background music began to fill the space once more. Lena straightened her uniform, wiped her hands, and continued her work, each movement a testament to her resilience. She was tired, yes, but not defeated. In her heart, she carried a quiet certainty that kindness, courage, and patience would always find their moment. And in the corner of her mind, she felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if the day wasn't yet finished, and the story of her strength was only just beginning. After the humiliating incident, Lena tried to focus on her work, wiping tables and serving the remaining customers as carefully as she could. The restaurant had quieted down, but the air still felt heavy, like the memory of what had happened was lingering in every corner. Lena could feel a strange tension in her chest, a mixture of anger and disbelief, but she refused to let it show. She reminded herself that reacting with fury would only give the woman more power, and she wasn't willing to let that happen. Not today. As Lena went about her duties, she noticed a few regular customers whispering among themselves, casting glances toward the empty table where the group had sat. Some shook their heads, while others gave her small, sympathetic smiles. Those gestures helped her hold on to her composure. She wasn't alone in feeling the injustice. There were people who understood, even if they hadn't spoken up. The woman who had poured the drink on her had left with her friends. But the story didn't end there. A few minutes later, Lena noticed someone entering the restaurant whose presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. He was tall, well-dressed in a dark suit, and moved with a calm, confident grace that made the restaurant feel smaller in his presence. He didn't rush, didn't glare, and didn't need to announce himself. He simply walked in and people seemed to instinctively step aside, giving him room. Lena felt a jolt of recognition. She had seen him before, although only in passing. He was the investor who had helped fund the restaurant, a man who rarely came in person but whose decisions shaped its future. The sight of him now made her heart race with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The man walked slowly through the tables, observing everything with quiet intensity. His eyes were sharp, but not in an aggressive way. Instead, they seemed to see everything clearly, understanding more than what was on the surface. Lena instinctively straightened her posture, brushing her wet apron with her hands, wishing she could look presentable in a way that matched the sudden importance of this moment. She was nervous but also relieved. She didn't know what would happen, but there was a sense in her that justice was about to take a form she hadn't yet imagined. As he moved closer to her station, Lena noticed the calm but firm way he carried himself. Unlike the loud arrogance of the woman who had humiliated her, this man exuded a quiet authority. There was no need for shouting or showing off. His presence alone demanded attention. The other customers watched him, some whispering quietly, their eyes wide with curiosity. Something important was about to unfold, and everyone sensed it. Finally, he reached Lena. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and for a moment, the warmth of that gesture took her by surprise. It was a simple touch, but it carried reassurance and protection, something Lena hadn't felt in that moment of humiliation. The restaurant seemed to pause around them, the hum of conversation fading into silence. Lena could feel her chest rise and fall rapidly, her hands tightening slightly as she tried to steady herself. She wanted to speak, to explain what had happened, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Then he looked up and over to where the woman in the bright dress had left. His eyes were steady, his expression unreadable at first, and then slowly, anger crept into his voice. He didn't raise it unnecessarily, but the words carried weight. "Why are you hurting my wife?" he asked, clear and direct. The restaurant went completely silent. Diners who had been watching in quiet curiosity now leaned forward, captivated by the sudden confrontation that had happened without any fanfare. The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible to ignore. Lena's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced, thinking about the woman who had humiliated her, and for the first time, she felt a sense of relief so profound it almost made her dizzy. She wasn't alone. She had never truly been alone. Someone who truly understood the value of respect and kindness had seen what had happened. The memory of the incident, the laughing, the spilled drink, the sneers, flashed in Lena's mind. But instead of anger, she felt something stronger, validation. She had handled herself with dignity when everyone else could have easily encouraged anger. And now, her patience and composure were finally being recognized. She realized that she had been strong all along, even if she hadn't realized it in the moment of humiliation. Lena's eyes met the investor's. For a brief moment, they shared a quiet understanding. He wasn't just defending her. He was showing her that kindness, patience, and integrity mattered more than any insult thrown in haste. His presence turned the narrative upside down. The arrogant woman's actions no longer held power because someone with true authority and insight had witnessed them. Meanwhile, the diners' reactions were a mix of awe and relief. A few murmurs of approval passed through the restaurant as people realized what had happened. Some even began whispering about how rare it was to see someone stand up for a person who had been wronged, quietly but effectively. The mood shifted, and the restaurant that had felt tense just moments ago now seemed lighter, filled with a new energy that only truth and justice can bring. Though the woman who had caused the problem had already left, the weight of the investor's presence seemed to follow her. In that instant, it was clear that arrogance and cruelty would not go unnoticed. Lena, still standing behind the counter, felt the tension drain from her shoulders. The warmth of support, quiet and steady, filled the space around her. She realized that dignity was not just about enduring humiliation silently. It was also about recognizing that justice has its own timing, and that strength is often rewarded in ways that are unseen until the right moment arrives. The manager, who had been observing quietly, now stepped forward. There was pride in her eyes, admiration for the way Lena had handled the situation. "You did well," she whispered softly. Lena nodded, a faint smile breaking through, though her hands still shook slightly from the adrenaline of the moment. She could feel the respect in the manager's words, and it was enough to reinforce what she had always believed. True strength lies in composure and kindness, not retaliation. At that moment, Lena realized that the incident had changed something within her. She had been embarrassed and hurt, yes, but she had not lost herself. She had maintained her dignity, and now, someone who mattered in her life had seen her courage and integrity firsthand. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had handled herself honorably. She understood that the arrogance and cruelty of others might create a moment of pain, but it could never define her character. The investor stayed near Lena, observing her work, offering subtle guidance and quiet encouragement. It was clear that he valued not just her skills but her character. Lena began to see the bigger picture. The world could be harsh, but people who treated others with respect and kindness were not only noticed, they were protected, supported, and ultimately elevated. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. The restaurant returned to its normal rhythm, the hum of conversations and clinking dishes gradually filling the space once more. Lena continued her duties, serving customers with careful attention, her confidence slowly returning. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her actions, small as they might have seemed in the moment, had made a difference. She had stayed true to herself, and the universe had responded in its own quiet, profound way. By the time the evening began to settle, Lena was exhausted but satisfied. She knew that life would continue to challenge her, and there would be more moments of frustration and injustice. But now she had a deeper understanding of her own resilience. She could face difficult people with grace, knowing that integrity and patience had a way of speaking louder than anger or retaliation ever could. As she wiped down the last table of the day, Lena looked toward the door, imagining the future. She had been tested today, but she had not faltered. She had endured humiliation, remained professional, and shown kindness in the face of cruelty. And in return, she had received recognition, protection, and the quiet power of being seen by someone who truly mattered. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of life, but it was profound, and it filled her with hope and determination for what was still to come. After the investor's quiet but powerful confrontation, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted completely. The arrogance and humiliation that had filled the room just hours ago were replaced with a sense of calm and reassurance. Lena felt the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen, and she allowed herself a small, relieved breath. The customers who had been quietly watching seemed to sense that the balance of power had changed, and the whispers of admiration for Lena's composure and quiet courage began circulating more openly. Even as the day moved forward, Lena couldn't shake the memory of the woman who had poured the fizzy drink over her. It had been humiliating in a way that felt sharp and personal, and even though she had remained calm, the incident had left a lingering ache. She tried to focus on her work, refilling water glasses and taking orders with her usual careful attention, but her mind kept drifting back to that moment. It was hard not to replay it in her head, imagining how different it could have been if she had reacted in anger. The manager, noticing Lena's lingering unease, approached her once again. "You handled that very well," she said quietly, placing a supportive hand on Lena's arm. "Most people would have lost their temper, but you didn't. You stayed professional, and that's more powerful than you realize." Lena nodded, appreciating the words. It was one thing to endure an insult quietly, but it was another to have someone acknowledge the strength it took to do so. She realized that sometimes, recognition from others could feel just as satisfying as personal satisfaction. Meanwhile, news of the incident had quietly spread among the restaurant staff and regular customers. By the time evening arrived, the story of the arrogant woman and the waitress who had remained calm had become a topic of hushed conversation. Some admired Lena's patience, while others shook their heads at the audacity of the woman who had acted so cruelly. The investor's presence had added an unspoken warning. Arrogance and mistreatment of others could not go unnoticed, especially when someone of authority was watching. Just as Lena was finishing her duties for the day, the restaurant door opened again, and a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was the woman from earlier, the one who had humiliated Lena. This time, however, her confident stride seemed slightly forced, her smile a little too tight. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room cautiously, clearly noticing the new energy in the air. There was a subtle tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. Lena's heart sank for a moment, but she quickly reminded herself to stay calm. She didn't want to give the woman the satisfaction of seeing her unsettled. She straightened her back, wiped her hands on her apron, and kept her focus on serving the remaining customers. The woman's friends hovered behind her nervously, sensing the change in atmosphere, and for the first time, it seemed like the group was unsure of themselves. The woman approached the counter, her voice attempting to carry the same sharpness as before, but it lacked the confidence it had earlier. I just wanted to apologize for earlier, she said, her words slightly rushed and awkward. Lena looked up at her, her expression neutral. She could see that this apology was not entirely genuine, that it was fueled more by the presence of the investor than by any real remorse. But she chose to listen quietly, giving the woman a chance to speak. The woman's friends exchanged nervous glances, clearly realizing that their previous behavior had crossed a line. They fidgeted slightly, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The tension in the room was palpable, and all eyes subtly turned toward Lena and the woman at the counter. It was a moment charged with unspoken emotions, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. I know I was out of line, the woman continued, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. It won't happen again. She glanced around, clearly hoping for some acknowledgement, some sign that her apology had been accepted. Lena considered her words carefully. She had no reason to escalate the situation further, but she also didn't want to give the impression that such behavior was acceptable. I accept your apology, Lena said calmly, her voice steady and measured. But I hope you understand that treating others with respect is not optional. It's something everyone deserves, no matter who they are. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The room seemed to pause again, the statement resonating with everyone present. The woman's shoulders slumped slightly, a mix of embarrassment and realization crossing her face. The investor, standing quietly nearby, observed the interaction with a calm intensity. His presence alone reinforced the seriousness of the moment. The woman seemed to notice him for the first time, her eyes widening slightly as she realized the implications of her actions. She had not just humiliated a waitress. She had crossed a line with someone who had both influence and authority. The realization hit her hard, and for the first time her arrogance seemed to falter. Lena continued to work, moving from table to table with the same careful attention as before. She served the remaining customers with grace, her actions steady and composed. The woman who had caused the trouble lingered awkwardly near the exit, clearly unsure of what to do next. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but Lena noticed it. She realized that true power doesn't come from arrogance or intimidation. It comes from patience, integrity, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. By the time the evening crowd had thinned, the woman and her friends had left the restaurant, their departure quiet and subdued. Lena took a moment to breathe, letting the tension of the day slowly melt away. She looked around the restaurant, noticing the small gestures of support from customers and staff alike. There were nods of approval, quiet smiles, and subtle acknowledgments that she had handled the situation with grace. It was a reminder that kindness and patience, even in the face of humiliation, could have a powerful impact. The manager approached Lena once more, her expression warm and reassuring. You were amazing today, she said softly. Not everyone could handle that situation the way you did. You showed strength and dignity, and that matters more than anything else. Lena nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride and relief. She realized that the day, though difficult, had been a lesson in resilience and the quiet power of integrity. As Lena finished her shift and prepared to leave, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, and there would be more moments where patience and composure would be tested. But she also knew that she had the inner strength to face those challenges, and that her actions, no matter how small, could inspire others and create change. Walking out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, Lena felt a sense of calm and determination. The events of the day had been difficult, but they had also been transformative. She had endured humiliation, maintained her dignity, and been recognized for her strength. She had learned that true power lies not in arrogance or cruelty, but in patience, integrity, and the quiet courage to remain true to oneself. As she made her way home, Lena reflected on the lessons of the day. She knew that the woman's arrogance had been a temporary display of power, and that real strength came from respect, kindness, and the ability to stay composed in the face of adversity. She felt grateful for the support of the manager, the silent encouragement of the regular customers, and the presence of the investor who had witnessed the incident. Each of these elements had reinforced the idea that dignity and integrity are always noticed, even when the world seems unfair. By the time Lena reached her apartment, the city lights twinkling around her, she felt a renewed sense of hope. She knew that the challenges of life would continue, but she also knew that she had the tools to face them with grace and strength. The events of the day had tested her, but they had also affirmed her character and resilience. She had remained true to herself, and in doing so, had shown that patience and kindness could triumph over arrogance and cruelty. Lena settled in for the night, reflecting on the quiet victories of the day. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but she also understood that each obstacle was an opportunity to demonstrate strength, integrity, and compassion. The memory of the humiliating incident would remain, but it would no longer be a source of pain. Instead, it would serve as a reminder of her resilience and the quiet power of remaining true to oneself, no matter how difficult the circumstances. As she drifted off to sleep, Lena felt a sense of peace. The day had been long and challenging, but it had also been a testament to the strength of the human spirit. She had endured humiliation, faced arrogance, and emerged with her dignity intact. And in that quiet moment, she realized that the story was far from over. There were more lessons to learn, more moments to face, and more opportunities to demonstrate the quiet, enduring strength that had carried her through the day. The next morning, Lena arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. The early sunlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the neatly arranged tables. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and bread, just as it always did. Yet today felt different. Lena could feel a quiet tension in the air, not from customers, but from the anticipation of what might happen after yesterday's incident. Though she had remained composed and strong, she knew that news traveled fast, and the woman who had humiliated her might try to return or at least stir trouble elsewhere. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she tied her apron, but she steadied herself, reminding herself that patience and composure had always carried her through difficult moments. As she began to prepare the tables, restock the counter, and check orders, Lena noticed her manager watching her with a small smile. The older woman's presence was comforting. She had always been a quiet pillar of support, ready to step in when needed, but never someone who demanded attention. "You handled yesterday very well," her manager said softly. "Not everyone could do what you did, and I want you to know that your patience and integrity made a difference." Lena nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. It was validating to hear acknowledgement not just for enduring the incident, but for staying true to herself under pressure. The first customers of the day arrived, bringing a familiar hum to the restaurant. Families and couples chatting softly, the clinking of cups, and the low sound of conversation created a comforting rhythm. Lena moved through the space efficiently, carrying drinks, taking orders, and smiling politely. Each action felt deliberate and calm, as though she were reclaiming the sense of normalcy that had been disrupted the previous afternoon. She reminded herself that every small action mattered, that each smile, each attentive gesture, reinforced the strength she had displayed. By mid-morning, A few of the regular customers who had witnessed the incident the day before came in and quietly acknowledged Lena. A nod, a brief smile, a whispered word of support. All of it reminded her that she wasn't alone, that there were people who saw her strength and appreciated her efforts. The small gestures, though subtle, carried immense weight. They reinforced the lesson that kindness and integrity are always noticed, even when it seems like no one is watching. As the morning crowd began to thin, the restaurant door opened once again. Lena glanced up instinctively and saw the woman who had humiliated her entering the restaurant. This time, however, she was alone, and her confident posture seemed forced, almost as if she were trying too hard to appear composed. Her eyes scanned the room nervously, and she paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. The atmosphere in the restaurant felt different now, lighter but firm, as though the events of the previous day had left a mark not just on Lena but on the space itself. The woman approached the counter slowly, clearly cautious. Lena felt a momentary pang of anxiety, but she steadied herself. She would not allow fear or anger to control her. She greeted the woman with her usual polite smile, keeping her voice steady. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you today?" The words were simple, calm, and professional, yet they carried a subtle strength that did not go unnoticed. The woman hesitated, her eyes darting around the restaurant. She seemed aware that she was being observed, and the awareness of yesterday's humiliation now seemed to weigh heavily on her. I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice unsteady, "for what happened yesterday. I realize I was out of line." There was a flicker of genuine emotion in her eyes, though it was mixed with nervousness. She seemed uncertain how to proceed, aware that an apology alone might not undo the damage of her actions. Lena nodded slightly, maintaining her composure. "Thank you for apologizing," she said calmly. "I appreciate it, but I hope you understand that respect is not optional. It's something everyone deserves, no matter who they are." Her words were firm yet gentle, carrying both acknowledgement and a clear boundary. The woman flinched slightly, realizing that her actions had consequences, and that patience and dignity had their own power. The woman's expression softened. She seemed to reflect on Lena's words, the weight of her previous arrogance slowly giving way to a sense of humility. "I understand," she said quietly. I hope I can make it right. I didn't mean to cause so much trouble." Her words were awkward, but there was a sincerity in them that Lena could sense. It wasn't the dramatic gesture of a sudden epiphany. It was a quiet, tentative acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The investor, who had returned to the restaurant to check on the morning operations, observed the interaction quietly from a distance. His presence was calm and unobtrusive, yet it added an unspoken gravity to the situation. The woman seemed to notice him, and for a moment her posture stiffened. She realized that the events of yesterday had not gone unnoticed by someone who had both authority and insight. The realization brought a subtle shift in her demeanor, a quiet acknowledgement that arrogance and cruelty carry weight and consequences, especially when observed by those who truly matter. Lena returned to her duties, moving between tables with careful attention. She served drinks, took orders, and smiled politely, maintaining the rhythm and calm that had become her strength. The woman lingered near the counter, her friends nowhere in sight, clearly processing the events of yesterday and the impact of Lena's composure. The dynamic had changed. The balance of power, once dominated by arrogance and intimidation, had shifted. Respect and patience had asserted themselves quietly but undeniably. By late morning, the restaurant was nearly empty. Lena took a moment to wipe down the tables and organize the counter, reflecting on the unfolding events. She realized that the incident, though painful, had been transformative. It had tested her patience, her composure, and her ability to remain kind under pressure. And it had revealed something important. Strength is not measured by force or intimidation, but by integrity, resilience, and the ability to maintain dignity in the face of adversity. The woman finally approached Lena again, this time with a more measured, calm demeanor. "I wanted to offer something," she said softly, placing a small note on the counter. "It's not much, but it's a way to show that I regret my actions." Lena glanced at the note but didn't immediately open it. She felt the sincerity in the woman's hesitation and recognized the effort it had taken to make even this small gesture. She nodded, accepting it quietly. "Thank you," she said simply. "Your acknowledgement means more than you realize." The woman lingered for a moment, then nodded and left, this time without the arrogance and bravado that had defined her presence the previous day. Lena watched her go, a sense of calm washing over her. The tension that had hung over the restaurant was gone. The space felt lighter, more balanced, as though the events had been a necessary test of patience, composure, and character. The manager approached Lena once again, her eyes warm with pride. "You've handled everything beautifully," she said. "Not just yesterday but today as well. It's not easy to remain composed under such pressure. And yet you've shown strength that inspires everyone around you." Lena smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The recognition from someone she respected, combined with the subtle support from customers and the investor, reinforced what she already knew. Patience, integrity, and kindness are powerful in ways that are often invisible but always meaningful. As the day drew to a close, Lena reflected on the lessons she had learned. She realized that humiliation and arrogance are temporary, fleeting moments in the broader landscape of life. What endures is the quiet strength of character, the ability to remain calm and compassionate even when treated unfairly. She understood that true power lies not in dominance or intimidation, but in patience, dignity, and the courage to act with integrity. Walking home that evening, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. The incident had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated, but it had also affirmed her resilience and inner strength. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, and there would be more moments where patience and composure would be tested. But she also knew that she had the tools to face those challenges with grace and confidence, and that the quiet power of integrity would always serve her well. By the time she reached her apartment, the city lights twinkling around her, Lena felt a profound sense of peace. The day had been long, challenging, and transformative. She had endured humiliation, faced arrogance, and emerged with her dignity intact. She had seen the power of patience, kindness, and integrity in action, and she understood that true strength is revealed not in moments of triumph, but in the way we respond to adversity. As she settled in for the night, Lena allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The events of the past 2 days had tested her, but they had also revealed the depth of her resilience and the strength of her character. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she felt confident in her ability to face them with grace, patience, and integrity. And in that quiet moment, she understood something profound: that kindness, patience, and dignity are forces that can change the course of events, influence those around us, and create a legacy far more meaningful than arrogance or cruelty ever could. The next few days passed quietly at the restaurant. The usual rhythm of serving customers, preparing meals, and managing the small chaos of a busy kitchen had returned. Lena moved through her tasks with calm efficiency, each action steady and deliberate. Yet, the memory of the arrogant woman lingered in the back of her mind. It wasn't fear anymore, but curiosity and a quiet sense of anticipation. She had seen the small signs of change, the woman's hesitant apologies, her brief moments of acknowledgement. But Lena knew that true accountability was more than a few words or gestures. It would take time, and she was ready to witness it unfold, if it ever did. The investor had been present intermittently, checking on the restaurant's operations, but more importantly, he had been offering subtle guidance and support to Lena. His presence was not overwhelming, yet it carried a quiet authority that reminded everyone in the restaurant of the importance of respect and integrity. Lena had grown to trust his judgment and his understanding of people. She knew that he had observed the arrogant woman closely and would act if her behavior crossed a line again. It gave her a quiet sense of security, a reassurance that her dignity was not just recognized, but protected. One afternoon, as the lunch crowd was beginning to thin, the woman appeared at the restaurant once more. This time, her entrance was cautious, almost tentative. She glanced around, her eyes flicking nervously from table to table, and for the first time, She seemed aware of how her previous actions had impacted the space. Her friends were not with her this time, leaving her alone with the consequences of her own behavior. Lena felt a small pang of anticipation mixed with calm resolve. She would not react out of fear or anger, but she was ready to face whatever was coming with the same patience and dignity she had maintained before. The woman approached the counter slowly, her voice low and careful. I want to speak with you," she said, avoiding Lena's eyes at first. Lena nodded slightly, signaling that she was listening, her expression neutral but attentive. The woman hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. I realize how wrong I was," she continued. "Not just in what I did, but in how I treated you. I've been thinking about it every day, and I want to make it right." Lena listened quietly, noting the sincerity in her tone. This was not the flippant apology of a person trying to save face. This was someone who had reflected on their behavior and recognized the harm they had caused. It was a small but important step toward accountability. Lena replied calmly, her voice steady and composed. "I appreciate your words," she said. "Acknowledging your mistake is the first step. But true accountability is not just about saying sorry. It's about changing the way you act and the way you treat others." The woman nodded, her expression serious. "I understand," she said. "I want to change. I want to learn how to be better, not just for you, but for myself. I don't want to be the kind of person who hurts others to feel powerful." There was a vulnerability in her eyes, a quiet honesty that Lena had not seen before. It was clear that the humiliation of the previous days, combined with reflection, had created a shift in her perspective. The investor, who had been quietly observing from a nearby table, stepped forward. His presence was calm but unmistakably authoritative. "Respect and kindness are choices," he said, his voice measured but firm. "They are the foundation of how we treat each other. It's never too late to start, but you must act with integrity every day, not just in words, but in your actions." The woman nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. She seemed humbled, her posture softened, and a sense of reflection settled over her. Lena felt a quiet satisfaction. The situation that had begun with humiliation and arrogance was now transforming into an opportunity for growth and understanding. She realized that true strength is not about winning or humiliating others, but about maintaining integrity, showing patience, and allowing space for others to learn and grow. She could feel a sense of closure forming, not just for herself, but for the space and the people around her. The woman lingered for a few moments, then spoke again, her voice quieter but steady. I want to do something to make amends. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to contribute to help, to show that I am serious about changing." Lena considered her words carefully. She knew that meaningful change comes not from grand gestures, but from consistent, small actions. She nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. "Actions speak louder than words. If you are sincere, it will show in the way you treat everyone, every day." The woman left a small envelope on the counter, which Lena opened discreetly. Inside was a note with a heartfelt apology and a small contribution to the restaurant, not as a bribe or an attempt to buy forgiveness, but as a symbol of acknowledgement and responsibility. Lena felt a warmth in her chest. This act, combined with her sincere words and reflection, indicated a real shift in perspective. It wasn't perfect, and the woman still had much to learn, but it was a meaningful step toward accountability. Over the next few days, Lena observed subtle changes in the woman's behavior. When she came into the restaurant, she was polite, considerate, and attentive to the staff. She no longer tried to dominate or intimidate. Instead, she greeted Lena and the other employees with genuine respect, showing that she had learned the lessons of humility and kindness. Her transformation was gradual, but it was real. Lena realized that the power of patience and integrity could influence even those who initially seemed unchangeable. The investor continued to provide quiet support, his presence a steady reminder that actions have consequences and that respect and kindness are values worth upholding. Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose in her work. She knew that her patience, composure, and integrity had created a ripple effect that went beyond the individual incident. The lessons of respect, humility, and accountability were now visible in the behavior of others, and she could see the positive impact of maintaining dignity under pressure. The restaurant itself felt different. The air was lighter, more harmonious, and filled with a sense of mutual respect. Customers noticed the positive atmosphere, commenting on the friendliness of the staff and the welcoming environment. Lena could see that the culture of the restaurant was shifting, slowly but surely, toward one where kindness, patience, and integrity were recognized and appreciated. It was a reminder that small actions, when consistent, have the power to create meaningful change. One afternoon, as Lena was serving a table, the woman who had humiliated her returned once more. This time, she walked in with quiet confidence, her demeanor calm and respectful. She approached Lena at the counter and spoke softly. "I want to thank you again," she said. "Your patience and kindness taught me something important. I realize now that how we treat others defines who we are, not what we have or what we wear." Lena smiled, a sense of fulfillment and closure washing over her. "I'm glad you've learned that," she replied gently. "It's never too late to change, and every day is an opportunity to show respect and kindness." The woman left after a short visit, her presence now marked by humility rather than arrogance. Lena watched her go, feeling a deep sense of peace. The incident that had begun with humiliation and anger had evolved into a story of growth, accountability, and transformation. She realized that patience, composure, and integrity were not just personal strengths. They had the power to influence others, to create positive change, and to restore balance in situations that seemed unfair or unjust. In the weeks that followed, Lena continued her work with renewed energy and confidence. She knew that challenges would arise, that there would be moments when patience and composure would be tested again. But she also knew that she had the inner strength to face those challenges with grace and dignity. The lessons she had learned from the incident, the power of integrity, the importance of accountability, and the impact of kindness, remained with her, guiding her actions and decisions. The restaurant thrived not just because of the quality of the food or service, but because of the culture of respect and kindness that Lena helped foster. Customers returned, appreciating the warm and welcoming atmosphere. Staff members felt supported and valued, inspired by Lena's example. The investor continued to provide guidance, reinforcing the principles of integrity and respect that had become the foundation of the restaurant's success. Lena reflected on the journey she had experienced. What began as a moment of humiliation had transformed into a powerful lesson in patience, kindness, and the strength of character. She realized that challenges and adversity are not just obstacles. They are opportunities to demonstrate courage, integrity, and compassion. By remaining true to herself, she had not only maintained her dignity, but had also influenced others to recognize the value of respect and accountability. One evening, as the restaurant closed and Lena prepared to leave, she took a moment to look around. The space felt alive with warmth, respect, and quiet harmony. She knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her for life. She had faced arrogance and humiliation, remained composed and kind, and witnessed the transformative power of integrity. The journey had not been easy, but it had been profoundly meaningful. Walking home under the soft glow of the city lights, Lena felt a sense of deep fulfillment. She understood that true strength lies not in confrontation or aggression, but in patience, dignity, and the ability to remain kind in the face of adversity. The incident with the arrogant woman had been a test, and she had passed with grace. More importantly, she had seen the potential for change in others, proving that respect and integrity are forces that can inspire growth and transformation. As she settled into her apartment that night, Lena reflected on the journey of the past days. She had endured humiliation, faced arrogance, maintained her dignity, and influenced change in someone who had acted cruelly. She had witnessed the power of patience, kindness, and integrity in action, and she knew that these lessons would continue to guide her throughout her life. The story of the arrogant woman and the fizzy drink had become more than just an incident. It had become a testament to the enduring strength of character and the quiet power of doing what is right. Lena drifted off to sleep with a sense of peace and accomplishment. She had faced a challenge, maintained her integrity, and helped transform a situation that had begun with cruelty into one of growth, respect, and accountability. She knew that life would continue to test her, but she also knew that she possessed the inner strength, patience, and kindness to meet those challenges with grace. And in that quiet moment, she understood something profound. Dignity, respect, and integrity are forces far more powerful than arrogance, cruelty, or wealth. They are the foundation of who we are and the legacy we leave in the world.